As we've been adjusting the width, something I've noticed is that it seems like there's an awful lot of padding to the right and to the left of these stacked hero sections. And so as we think of a solution for cascading these blocks into multiple rows, let's also think about what this padding or margin is all about. So let's go to the design and take a look. Now, as we look down the left side of this design, it seems like the margin or padding here is consistent from the header down to these stacked hero sections, and that cascades all the way down, with the slight exception here of the previous and next elements in the slideshow that kind of move out past this edge. But we can go down the entire site down to the footer, and that margin stays the same. Same with the right-hand side. So this can suggest a couple different things. And you have to figure out which angle you're going to take as the front-end developer, because what we're seeing here is a set of clues rather than a definitive answer in what we're supposed to do here. But what I'm seeing is that these sections will stay this size as the browser gets bigger than what's being depicted here in the mockup. So that is, the padding on the left and the padding on the right will extend equally to either side as the browser gets bigger. And then, as the browser gets smaller, let me try to demonstrate what I'd see here. We'd see that padding being reduced on either side until we get to some minimal amount. Let me pull in a little bit more. So maybe by the time we got to here, with this amount of padding to either side, then we'd start adjusting the elements within each section using different strategies and media queries. The alternative interpretation, which we've been coding for so far, is that we should always have this padding, even as the browser gets smaller. So if we go back to the browser and look at this example, as we make the browser smaller, our padding to either side stays consistent. But if we went with the other interpretation, this padding would get smaller until maybe it was 20 pixels or 30 pixels on either side, and then the content would start collapsing. Now, we do have an element here, the slideshow, which looks like it could be an exception to this rule. Perhaps as the browser gets bigger, these forward and next buttons still hug either side, kind of like we've set up in the footer, where if we scroll down, the address is hugging this side and the social icons are hugging this side. So we could decide to interpret it that way, where it's more like the footer than it is like the header and the stacked hero sections. So I'm going to make some calls as a front-end developer here. What I think is intended by this design is that this padding should actually collapse down until it's a bit smaller. That means that this layout will be able to remain consistent longer than if we decided that we needed this amount of padding no matter what. So this kind of rule we're going to apply to the header, both sections of the header, and also our stacked hero sections. Now this particular section, the snippet section, might require some additional styling because these arrows bump into a margin that will disappear as the browser gets smaller. But I think it's an exception rather than the rule. So what this means is that as we're coding this, let's design it so that the padding to the right and to the left will collapse down. And that way we'll know a little bit more about where to set our breakpoint, which we need to add in order to move these two blocks below these two blocks. Now, another thing that this means is that this is going to have a fixed layout if the browser is between roughly this size here and anything bigger than it. So we need to figure out what the width is going to be. So it looks like it'll be about 960 pixels.